Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We'll give everybody a chance to pop on. Thanks for joining us. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think we're going to get started and we'll let people pop on as we get going here. Good afternoon and welcome to the Missouri Public Transit Association's Education Series webinar on cost-conscious marketing for small to mid-sized transit systems. My name is Travis Wood. I'm the Senior Director with MPTA. And I want to welcome MPTA board members who are joining us today, including two of our panelists today. Really appreciate you taking the time. Welcome to our Executive Director, Kim Sella, who's on the call as well today, and to all of our members and stakeholders who are joining us and who will be watching this recording in the future. Appreciate all you do to move transit forward every day in Missouri. Our goal with today's discussion is to cover transit marketing basics, including promotional strategies, that provide value for small and mid-sized transit systems. Our presenters will cover some Transit Marketing 101, case studies, and provider experiences marketing transit here in Missouri as well. So to kick things off, we'll have presentations from each of our panelists, and we'll end with some Q&A time at the end. So as a reminder, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave them in the chat or the Q&A tab, and I'll be monitoring that as we go. So I'm going to start with welcoming our panelists today. We have with us Selena Barlow. She's the sole proprietor of Transit Marketing, has more than 30 years of experience marketing and planning public transportation services throughout the U.S. And as the name implies, Transit Marketing specializes in developing marketing plans, brands, and campaigns for transportation agencies. Selena's worked with dozens of small urban and rural transit agencies throughout the nation. She's also an experienced trainer, providing training at the state and national level in transit marketing, outreach, and market research. She regularly presents for CTAA, National RTAP, CalACT, and other state associations. Also with us today is Elea Carey, who has 30 years of marketing experience, including introducing new marketing ideas in emerging environments. When the pandemic hit, she shuttered her Silicon Valley marketing consultancy, Open Transit Happy, and now exclusively serves public transit agencies nationwide. She develops strategic marketing plans, launches creative, PR, and paid media campaigns, and implements marketing tactics on behalf of clients. Promoting transit to multilingual audiences is one of her greatest passions. Elea also teaches and trains small urban and rural transit agencies on marketing best practices. She's recently presented to transit groups in New Mexico, California, and Arizona. And joining us today to offer a local perspective are two of our very own MPTA board members, who many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. We have with us Ginny Smith, the Executive Director of Cape Girardeau County Transit Authority, bringing more than 15 years of experience in the transportation industry. She has a proven track record in safety, compliance, and organizational growth, and is recognized for her strong leadership and ability to foster team success. Her expertise spans logistics management, conflict resolution, and effective communication, skills that have been essential to her accomplishments in the public transit sector. And last but not least, we have Tracy Jones, the Executive Director of Southeast Missouri Transportation Service, or SMTS, overseeing one of the largest rural public transportation systems in the nation and the second largest in Missouri. Since her appointment in 2024, she has led the organization's strategic direction, operations, financial management, and service delivery. SMTS serves communities across the region with a team of over 175 employees and approximately 10 million in annual capital and operating revenue. Thank you all for joining us today. And to kick things off, we're going to start with our local provider perspective before we get a bigger picture on transit marketing in general. So Tracy, let's start with you. I'm going to stop sharing so you can go ahead and share your slides.
All right. Hello, everyone. Let me get my screen. I'll share it up here. Can everyone see it?
There it goes. Yep.
Everything looks good. All right. My name is Tracy Jones with SMTS. And we just had a few little things that we thought we would kind of go over what's working for us and what isn't working for us. Just to give you a little background, we do cover 21 counties in Southeast Missouri. We do demand response, paratransit, fixed route, and that includes local and long distance for most of those. When we are looking at our marketing focus, there are two key considerations that I try to keep in mind. One, of course, would be return on investment. What is our budget? How much do we want to spend? And can we track that return on investment and whether it's going to make sense for us? And then, of course, we always want to consider our target demographic. We will transport the general public. Anyone can ride, but there are demographics that are most likely to ride our services. And that would be your low income, your seniors, your individuals, disability, because we do have quite a bit of wheelchair accessible vehicles and things of that nature. I would say we group our strategies into about 8 categories. We've got word of mouth, websites, social media, vehicle wraps, Google or SEO. You got print ads and newspapers, radio, and television. Let's see here. So what works for us and what doesn't work for us, I've kind of broken into categories here to kind of go over each one. Word of mouth, people trust what other people say to them, what their friends say, what their family says, and word of mouth is free. What may not work and could be a con to that would be the fact that you could receive negative recommendations. People may not like the service. They may not be comfortable with it. They may not know where to find the service. Probably one of the most frequent complaints that I hear is that our service doesn't accommodate the time frame that they need services, either the day of the week or maybe they want evening hours or weekends. And that can be a bad thing, of course, when people are talking about the negative things of your service. My screen is blocked. Hold on a second here. The top of my screen is blocked off. What does that second one say up there? It's cut off on me.
Vehicle wraps. Social media.
Social media.
Yeah.
All right. Social media. Sorry about that. It's real. It's personal. When we share things on our Facebook here, a lot of times it's events in the community that have happened, festivals and parades, fun days, things like that. And that builds trust with the local areas. And then, what doesn't work is that has limited reach. Your target demographic, for example, if we're only doing Facebook, which currently that is what we do, you may not reach the younger generations. They don't use that as much, but you might reach some of the older generations. So you have a limited amount of people that you're hitting there, and not necessarily the target demographic that you're looking for. Vehicle wraps, that is probably one of my favorites, is because it's a one-time cost. It's upfront. Our vehicles are constantly moving. You're going to be seen by anybody and everybody around all various parts of the area. So those are really great. The things that don't work with it is that you've got a lack of contact information on the sides of vehicles, and the reason that we don't have as much is because we have to share vehicles across county lines sometimes, back up for services. And the way we operate is each local community or local office does their own scheduling. And so we couldn't necessarily publish one number that would get them to the local office they need. So that doesn't always work well for us. And if you just see SMTS on the side of our vehicle, you don't know who we are, you may not recognize who we are or what we do. And so that's kind of a con, but it is nice that if people are somewhat familiar with your service, they see you all over and they remember you. Google, SEO searches, that is really great if that's working. It does work well for us. We've got things set up with a company called Thrive, and they help kind of organize our SEO and our Google searches. It publishes on things like Yellow Pages and just makes sure everything works flawlessly when people search for SMTS. It does take some time to set up, and that can be a problem, but the minimal cost makes it worth the effort. Websites. Our website is a really great place because, again, if you've got a Google search and you hit our website, you can find any kind of information you need. We can put product information, service information, times, route schedules, all of that on there for them. The cost is minimal to host a website, which is great. It does take time to set up, especially if you're trying to coordinate with the SEO, the Google searches, and things like that, because you can build keywords into the website so that people find it easier, or when they're searching for keywords themselves, like transportation in Southeast Missouri, we want to make sure that they find us. Print ads, that can be newspapers, that can be brochures. I typically think of newspapers when people say print ads, but we do market some of our own brochures. Our own brochures are actually the better option for us because we can make them simplified, give them out as we need to. We give them out at events, on the bus. Newspapers can be limited because not everybody reads newspaper anymore, or gets them delivered. So that already limits your reach. And they cover a small area. If you publish in one area, then you have to publish in a whole lot of areas. For SMTS, with us covering such a large number of counties in Southeast Missouri, then that's a lot of newspapers, and it can get very expensive doing it that way. We found that smaller brochures or smaller targeted ads through newspapers works well for us. If they're doing a campaign for transportation, or maybe like a senior safety week, and we can target ads to those do pretty well for us. Radio is a complicated one, in my opinion. You've got a large demographic that we reach, which is your disabled individuals. You've got low income, you've got your seniors, and the reason they are riding with us typically is because they don't have a vehicle, which a vehicle is where most people listen to the radio, is in the car. And if they're not driving, then it's not as likely that they are listening to that unless they are listening at home. But most people have on the TV at home as opposed to the radio. So we do some radio advertising, but very little, just because we don't feel that there's a huge return on investment to it. But we do want to still reach those younger generations, because not only may they need to use our transportation, but they may have parents or grandparents that might need our transportation. So making sure that they know about our service is important too, even though they're not our direct target. Then you've got television. Again, like I said, that might be our best demographic our best campaign for the demographic that we serve, because they are more likely to be at home watching TV. But it is very expensive. It's difficult to see the return on investment on it, to track it, to know who's seeing it, how often. That's difficult to determine. So when you look at the cost of that, it's just not usually enough to qualify. So we do a little bit of television advertising. We used to do a little more. We just didn't feel like we were getting enough return on it, and we've kind of brought that back down. So I would say that the biggest takeaway for us, and I think most people, is that it's ever evolving. Your needs change, your demographics change, costs change, how people utilize these different services change. Just like with newspapers, a long time ago, that would have been a really great place to market, to advertise, but things have shifted, so you have to shift with it. And that's kind of the strategy that we take, is just continue to look and see what's working and what's not.
All right. Thanks, Tracy, so much. I'm going to kick it over to Ginny now. Can you give us some insight on what your experience has been in the Cape Girardeau market? I can't talk today. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I am. There we go. I'm going to share my screen with everyone.
Perfect.
All right. So as Travis has said, I'm the executive director here at Cape Girardeau County Transit. We kind of practice the smart, simple, and strategic when it comes to marketing. We're a little bit different in SMTS in the way that we are considered a small urban as well as a rural, because we are a whole county provider. So we have an area of our county that is a small urban. So that does attract a different audience for marketing purposes, a younger demographic, which can kind of be challenging. We definitely don't see the return on investment with a lot of the newspaper ads, things like that. They just don't respond well. So we provide a fixed route service for the city of Cape Girardeau, as well as SEMO University, which has just started in August. We do demand response service as well as van pool service for like a ride to work program. You know, we feel like our biggest challenges is doing more with less. We have a very limited marketing budget, limited staff that is, you know, already handling multiple jobs. I think there's 3 of us in the admin office for our whole county. It's quite a bit of work there. Low county community awareness of our services. We still get people every day that have lived here their whole entire life that don't realize that there's public transit in Cape County. Misconceptions about who we provide public service for, transit for. We feel that we are still deemed for the old people or the medical necessity. So we're still kind of working through overcoming that stigma with what we can do with the budget. Then we have limited resources to measure what actually works. I'll echo Tracy there. Like if we knew what our return on our investment is, we would absolutely be willing to spend money. But sometimes that's just a hard measurable thing for us. We feel like what has worked with us in the past is community partnerships. We have wonderful community partnerships, whether it be medical facilities that have invited us in that hand out our brochures, senior centers. We've even went and volunteered our time to help serve meals on special events that they've had to kind of educate that demographic of what we have to offer. Workforce agencies, we have a lot of employment. We service the industrial industry here a lot, so they staff with employment agencies. We try to direct that information to our community partners, then that can educate those people who may need our service, because strong word of mouth presence here is huge. Social media storytelling. We all have social media, some form of it, I'm sure, and most of our demographic does as well too. Telling our riders' stories has been powerful for our service. People are more apt to relate to the riders. Maybe they know the person whose story we're telling. Maybe it's a younger demographic, maybe it's an older demographic, but social media has been huge. Recently, we celebrated 25 years of service. We did a whole series on our riders as well as our drivers that had huge following. And then presence in the community. We go to job fairs, health fairs, community events. We passed out candy at Halloween. We do all of those things that are free for us to do, other than a little bit of marketing items that we take with us. But honestly, having our face in the community is huge. Not only just our presence, but our vehicles. Like Tracy said, our vehicles, we make sure that they're clean. We have great wraps on them. They have all the information. They know who it is that's providing the service for anybody that may be seeing our vehicles go by. What hasn't worked, I think, goes back down to several of the things already, like newspaper ads. We've had very little return that we can tell on posting job openings. We kind of use newspapers as our help wanted seeking, and it doesn't work for us. We've tried radio ads there. It doesn't really attract any more people. We feel our drivers are honestly our best recruiters when it comes to finding other drivers, so we work to educate them. As far as complicated messaging, when I first started 2 years ago, our rider brochure was full of so much information. There was price schedules and all of these different things. They don't really want riders, sorry. I have automatic timer in my office with my lights. We have complicated brochures and information. Riders just want to know, how do I ride? How do I pay? What's it going to cost? Who do I call? We simplified all of that, and we have found that that's been huge for them to better understand our service. Very little information is really needed at that initial piece of learning about public transit. Then inconsistent social media posts. We found if we posted at least 3 to 4 times a week, we were popping up on people's news feeds as they would scroll through Facebook. As long as we could get them to follow us, or you may know, or follow this type of a situation, our riders realized that that was their best source of information for the most accurate information. Looking ahead for our affordable marketing opportunities, obviously we are always looking ahead about what works for us, and digital advertising is definitely one of the things that is the big movement. So we're asking our drivers to create short recruitment videos. We're going to share on social media as why you drive for us. Maybe they'll know the driver will share it on their personal Facebook page. We're putting together short rider tutorial videos on our website on how they use our service. Like, as I mentioned, we have fixed route service. Well, we also launched a app for our riders to now track the buses live. So we created our own how to use this app, from downloading it on your phone to where the bus tracking actually works. Educating our drivers. We start that from the day one they start with the training process. We make sure that they understand our services, our programs, the potential riders that need to use our system. So when they're approached by someone driving by with like, hey, can I catch a ride with you? They can better explain to them, yes, but here's what you have to do, or maybe we can help you, maybe we can't. They are really the faces, the primary point of contact for all of our riders. I mean, I'm sometimes lucky enough to meet some of them here in the office, but for the most part, I don't see our riders face to face. And we ask our riders, we have some great riders to tell their friends. They are great ambassadors. We have asked certain riders to ride the city bus route, and even CMO students to educate their fellow students, to educate their fellow riders on how they use the transit app that we just launched. Honestly, that's been huge. We've learned a lot about marketing isn't about how much we spend. It's about being visible, consistent, and genuine. We've built great community relationships in the last 2 years of me being here, with a 35% at least increase in ridership. So what we're doing is working, and we're just trying to do it on a very limited budget. That's all I got, Travis.
All right, thanks so much, Ginny, and thanks to Ginny and Tracy for offering that local perspective here in Missouri. And now we're going to turn to Selena and Elea to give us a broader look at transit marketing in general. So take it away. Oh, I think you're still muted.
Yep, you're muted.
Okay, that should be better. Well, Tracy and Ginny just gave some amazing examples of great marketing. They obviously have it all figured out. So we're going to back up a little bit and do a little bit of marketing 101. Just talk about what is sort of the rationale behind some of these strategies. So let's begin with, what is marketing? Because a lot of times we think of marketing, people will say, oh, that's advertising, or that's outreach, or that's one thing. But the fact is that marketing is not a single promotional tactic or a single campaign. It is everything you do to communicate with and influence your potential riders and your community. It is everything from market research, understanding your riders, to branding your buses, to doing passenger information on the internet or in print, to the experience that people have when they get on Ginny's buses and they meet her drivers and they help them out. That is all part of marketing. And it's not something that you do once or that you do quarterly. It is something you do day in, day out. It's just like putting fuel in your buses. It is an ongoing process of operating a transit agency. Sometimes people talk about marketing as if it's a panacea. Oh, well, if you just marketed more, everything would be fine. But the fact is, marketing is not a magic wand. It is more like a crowbar that we use to leverage good service. Because the fact is that no amount of marketing can sell or fix service that doesn't meet the potential rider's needs. I think it was Tracy or Ginny, I can't remember which, talked about their target groups and the groups they really have something to offer. That is what marketing can leverage, is to encourage those people to use transit. So marketing can't fix bad service, but what it can do is create awareness of your good service, make people aware that transit is available, and educate them about the benefits that it has to offer. It can also overcome those misconceptions or stigma that Tracy and Ginny talked about. the idea that transit is just for the elderly or just for the poor or just for people with disabilities, that it's not for me. If well done, transit can also engage the attention of potential riders and of your community and get them to think about transit a little differently, to think of it as an alternative as opposed to just something that's invisible in the background. So how is transit marketing different than other marketing? A lot of times in the commercial world, marketing is mostly trying to sell a product to a specific target group. But in transit, we have to address multiple goals and multiple audiences. We need to build visibility and support, not just among people that are going to ride our service, but among the general public, because that includes taxpayers and it includes decision makers and gatekeepers, people that while they may not use our services directly, have a big influence on our ability to provide those services and to encourage others to use them. We need to educate people about what transit has to offer. What are the benefits of transit? But even more explicitly than that, we need to educate potential riders about how to use our service, because a lot of times that is the big barrier that keeps people from trying transit. I don't know where it goes. I don't know when it runs. I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to pay. All of the things that Ginny mentioned, they put in their passenger guides. We need to do that education process. We also, in order to overcome that stigma, we need to show people how transit benefits other than those other people. We need to show employers how transit can get their riders to work. We need to show commuters and students how transit can be a cost-effective way for them to get to their jobs, to get to school, to get to expanded economic opportunity. And then finally, we just need to encourage people to try it. We need to do things to get our regular riders to ride more and to get potential riders to give transit a try. And sometimes those are very direct things like free ride days. So that's what marketing is in the transit world. But what does cost conscious mean? Cost conscious really means value, doing things that have value, not necessarily things that are free or cheap, although a lot of the strategies we've talked about don't cost much of anything. But what's really important is that they are effective and efficient at reaching the right audience with the right message. So for example, if I am in Sedona, Arizona, which isn't too far from where I live, and I want to reach visitors, tourists that are coming there to get them to use our transit service, I wouldn't run ads in the local newspaper or on the radio station because those are not things that tourists are listening to or looking at. What I might do is put up displays in local hotels and work with those partners to communicate with their customers the information that is directly applicable to tourists. That is both cost conscious and it has long-term value. Those displays are in place for a long time. And that is another thing that creates cost consciousness, is doing things that have long-term value. Whereas a radio spot is here and gone in 30 seconds. A branded bus, like the one you see on the screen, is out there day in, day out, communicating that transit is available. So when we think about cost conscious, think about things that have longer term value. Cost conscious also means targeted, and that means understanding what benefits we offer and who those benefits are relevant to. Transit pretty much offers two kinds of benefits: personal benefits like basic mobility, economy, time value, and then, societal benefits like mobility equity, environmental benefits, economic benefits. The societal benefits are relevant to everyone, whether they use transit or not, particularly to our decision makers and taxpayers in our community. Personal benefits are generally what we want to talk about when we're trying to attract people to transit, because those are the things that get people to actually ride the bus. But which of those benefits are relevant depends on what audience we're trying to talk to. Is it seniors? Is it students? Is it commuters, families? Who is it we're communicating with, and which of those benefits is relevant to them? What seniors care about is likely to be different than what service workers care about. And so we need to think about who we're talking to. Once we've thought about that, then we can determine what are the hot button things that we need to say. What information do we need to provide to influence those potential riders to actually give transit a try? And then to make it cost conscious, we need to think about which communication channels will reach the right audience without a whole lot of waste, and how we can use our internal resources, like people going out doing outreach, again, to reach those right audiences. Because we can do a lot of things with our money and with our staff time, but what we need to do is carefully think about which are the things that are going to reach the right target audience with the right information. Before I turn it over to Elle to talk about promotional opportunities, I do want to talk just a little bit about branding. Your vehicles and buses, as I think Tracy pointed out, are out there on the street seen by thousands of people every day. They are an opportunity to use your capital investments to create long-term communication value. In fact, I believe that bold branding of buses and bus stop signs is probably the most cost-effective way to build visibility among your overall population, to remind them that transit is there and where it goes and who it serves. I'm going to give you a dollars and cents example of why I say it's the most cost-conscious way to build visibility. Let's say you spend $10,000 to wrap a bus with the kind of high visibility image that you see here. That bus, even in a small community, is likely to be seen by 5,000 people a day. In a city or a large area, it'd be seen by a lot more. Let's say that bus is on the road 5 days a week, 250 days a year, and the life of a cutaway vehicle is about 5 years, and that's about the life of a wrap. That bus would be seen by 6,250,000 people. That would be the number of exposures that it would get. That is less than 0.16 cent per exposure. That's pretty doggone cost conscious. That is a very low cost per exposure. And the fact is, it's paid for with your capital dollars, something that a lot of times we have more of than we have marketing dollars. So that's the reason I say that branding is probably the most conscious way to build visibility. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Elle to talk about other cost-conscious promotional opportunities.
So, hi, everybody. I'm Elea Carey. Everybody calls me Elle. Tracy and Ginny did such a good job of going over what works well for them in their promotional options. I'm going to talk about breaking down your promotional options into basically 3 categories: unpaid promotional options, paid promotional options, and the work you do through partners in your community. So unpaid means it doesn't mean that it's free. You might have to spend some staff time on it. You might have to spend some printing money on it, for example, but you're not writing a check as you are with paid promotional options, where you write a check and in exchange you get something like an ad in the newspaper. And your partnered promotional options that I think both of you spoke really eloquently to has to do with working through partners in your community, because those people, they represent these really large audiences that you can reach without having to do that work yourself. So let's start with unpaid options. The place I like to start here is media relations or public relations. This means developing a relationship with reporters and editors in your community and sending them your news in a timely fashion. I think it's really important to get to know your local reporters and follow their work, even when it's not about transit, and comment on it. Share it on your social media channels or maybe in your newsletters if it's relevant to your audiences. And make their job easier by providing them with well-written news releases in advance of when your news is going to run. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. And create a news release calendar. So every year, sit down and write out what news you want to share during the year, and think about what channels you want to share that on, who you're going to send it to, what journalists you're going to send it to, and so that you know in advance. For example, if you're going to promote Transit Equity Day, free rides on Transit Equity Day on February 4th, make sure that they have that information a couple of weeks in advance so they can plan to work it into their publication. Public speaking, going out and talking to people in your community is a great way to raise awareness and to promote ridership for people who you might not otherwise encounter. It's a really good way to build support among, for example, taxpayers and voters, people who might vote on some bond measure to support your system. Your potential audiences could be community gatherings or government meetings like your city council meeting, student orientations. If you have a community college or a college or even a high school in your region, you want to reach those people. You might want to address their student orientation at the beginning of the years. Senior centered, I know that all of you serve seniors to some capacity and another, and you might want to like sponsor a lunch and set up a trip planning table to show seniors where they can go on transit. Social service agencies, you might want to train the staff of any of these organizations to be able to speak knowledgeably about your system so that they can talk to their clients about how to use transit. If you're going to do some public speaking, there are some tools that could make your speaking more impactful. You might want to create a PowerPoint or a video to talk about your service. Take along handouts of your regular writer's guides, or you might have targeted materials, like you might have a senior shopper shuttle that you might want to take to a senior lunch that you're doing. And as I said, you could set up a trip planning table so that you can explain to people how simple it is to get from one place to another. And for example, showing people that they can use Google Maps on their phone is always a very satisfying moment. People don't necessarily know that they can do transit planning on Google Maps, so that's a really cool thing to do. And just as we're doing right here in this day and age, some of these presentations can be remote, so you don't even have to leave your office to do it. Social media, Tracy and Ginny both address social media and its role in their lives. One small caution, I think, is make sure that your website is a healthy, robust website and you're not using your Facebook page to act as your website. But social media channels can be a great place to share news about your organization, excuse me, and work with partner organizations, either tagging them in your posts or, as probably many of you are familiar, that Meta has recently launched collabs, which are collaborations. So basically it looks like your post has gone out for your organization and also for from somebody else's channel. That's a great way to expand your audience and grow your social media following. You do have to devote some time to social media to respond to users' comments and questions. And as I believe it was Ginny saying, making the posting consistent 3 or 4 times a week makes a huge difference in how much the algorithms will prioritize your posts. Events are wonderful places to get out and meet people who normally you wouldn't encounter with any of your other marketing. You might set up a table, a booth, or a bus at a local community event, or by attending your marketing partners events, maybe health fairs or senior what do they call those? Senior fairs, senior lifestyle fairs. If you can bring a bus, that's fantastic to give people an opportunity to get on the bus and see, just make themselves comfortable aboard a bus. I love community touch-a-bus events that transit can participate in, and it shows kids, they bring fire trucks and police vehicles and a transit bus, and kids love these things and gets kids interested in transit early. You might want to create your own events or a Stuff the Bus event for Thanksgiving or Toys for Christmas or school supplies. Many transit agencies do those and partner with somebody like Toys for Tots or some other local agency that can help you put on this event. Selena, if you go back, I really kind of skipped over Cyclovia, and I want to talk about Cyclovia for a second. So this is an event that's put on in Tucson called Cyclovia. So it's not an event that SunTran, the transit agency, does in Tucson, but Cyclovia puts on the event. And this is an opportunity for Suntran to bring a bus and let people learn how to load their bike onto the bus there at the event instead of having to do that first time on the street, which can be kind of nerve-wracking to do. Okay, thanks for going back to that. So paid options. When we think about paid options, a lot of us think about traditional media advertising. Ginny and Tracy addressed all of these topics, and I think it just depends on all of these areas where you could advertise. And I think it just depends on whether that's an effective marketing tool in your particular market. In some places, newspaper is very strong especially in small communities. People are very devoted to the newspaper, and especially older folks who still read the print copy and may also read it online. TV it might be good in your market. I usually don't recommend it because it can be kind of expensive, but something to be aware of with TV now is not only could you buy an ad that would run on the regular TV station, sometimes regular TV broadcasts, sometimes TV stations can act as sort of your agency for digital marketing, and they sometimes are able to put together these packages of digital marketing where it involves their TV station, but your ads could also show up elsewhere online. So that may be something to talk to your local TV rep about. If you are going to use radio, I like it. I think it is effective. I found it to be relatively affordable, and it's very effective if you can sponsor something on the radio station. Although, Tracy, I think you made a really good point that people do listen to their radio listen to radio in the car a lot, and that's not necessarily the group that you want to reach, although it can be very effective if you're sponsoring traffic and they're stuck in traffic and listening to the traffic report and your ad for your transit agency comes on. We did very successful radio campaigns in central Kentucky because the radio station was very focused on high school sports, and the transit agency we were working with sponsored the high school football games, and that was very effective advertising. Cinema ads are these ads that run before the previews in the movie theater, and if your service goes by there, this could be a great geographically targeted place to advertise. Always, when you're making these kinds of decisions, consider, is the medium a cost-efficient way for you to reach your target audience? Is your target audience paying attention to radio, newspaper, TV, or going to the movies? Digital advertising, those are ads that appear online. You might get banner ads or ads on websites. We see them, they pop up on our phones and on our computers all the time. This is an example of one that we bought in Southern California that popped up in the newspaper. You can see the newspaper version on the left and the close-up of the ad on the right. The great thing about any kind of digital advertising is that you can target it by geography, by demographics, by online behavior. These ads were for a service that went to an airport, and so we targeted them to people who were searching about parking at the airport. Social media ads, similarly, you can target them very specifically, and including by their interests. And social media ads, when you buy them, they don't just reach your social media following. They reach broader than that because you're targeting by geography and demographics. And this is an example of a social media ad that had a free ride offer attached to it. So people clicked through and got a free ride offer. Direct mail is kind of like, it's sort of like this old school, very targeted way to promote. We really like it and highly recommend it, in part because you can pick where you want it to go based on the mail routes that it's going to be delivered to, and you can match that to where your service goes. And that means that people who are very likely to ride your service, the bus perhaps goes right by their house, they're going to get this information in the mail about your service. Every Door Direct Mail is a company that sets up, find it online, and you can use their online map to pick where you want your direct mail piece to go. So these highly visible, large colored postcards, even if somebody doesn't hold on to it for very long, they're going to see it when it arrives in the mail. And it's also a great way to provide a free ride coupon. Here's a sample back of a direct mail piece that shows a map that's specific to the area where it was mailed and also has a free ride pass. I can't remember if it was Tracy or Ginny talking about sort of the rolling fleet of billboards that you have in your, parked in your garage. So these are your resources that you can use to promote your own system. I know some of you are probably selling advertising on your buses, but some of that space, even if you are selling advertising, some of that space should be reserved for you to promote yourself every now and then. You might wrap a bus, like in this example with the MPTA system in California, or use the panels on the sides of the bus, or window clings. Maybe in your bus shelters too, you might have advertising space, or many of your vehicles will have that overhead space where you can put those paper cards, we call them car cards, with promotions. This is an example of a etiquette campaign to remind people how to behave on the bus. Your partnered approaches are probably the most effective thing you're going to do besides branding. This is just, it's sort of miraculous that you get to maybe deliver your presentation once or deliver a handful of rider guides once to these community partners, and they distribute them to their audiences. And those partners could be colleges and schools. It could be your local social service agencies and senior centers. You might want to consider large residential communities as a place where you would, through which you would distribute information. Businesses and chambers of commerce may want to share your information, and destinations that your service goes to, like maybe a theme park. Best practices in working with community partners: develop a list and keep it updated regularly. It can be hard to keep these things updated because people change their jobs and job titles a lot, so you really have to stay on top of that. Communicate with them regularly with email updates. You might want to consider sending them the things that are on your content calendar, like you would send your press releases to the local press. Ask for opportunities to address their staff or their clients, and then ask them what's the best way to communicate with their constituents. Could you put up a tabletop display, for example, like this, which is, these are brochures on the right where a person could take a brochure about the system, and also a display that shows a map about what the system does. What kind of collateral would be good to distribute? For example, like a flyer. Could you put that in an orientation package for a college? Do their clients pay a lot of attention to their social media? Could they share your posts? And can you take an opportunity to do travel training with their staff so that their staff can speak knowledgeably about transit? Always follow through with the targeted messaging. For example, making sure that the senior centers have your senior guides and with materials, and set yourself up a calendar so you know when you need to refill materials. So Selena, I think we have a little bit of time left for you to talk about case studies, sort of putting it all together.
Right. Well, in the last 30 minutes, 35, we've thrown a lot of strategies at you, a lot of ideas about how you could market. I'm just going to show you how a couple of systems have done it with a couple of case studies. This first one illustrates the importance of understanding your audience and then how you can use that information to craft messages that'll resonate with them. This was in San Bernardino, California. You've seen a few examples as Elle went through. We did a project that involved 4 rural transit agencies in the same county. They wanted to do a single creative campaign that could be used throughout the region. So we began with a survey of riders on board all of the buses, and we asked them, what did they like about transit? What was the benefit of using it? And we heard overwhelmingly that they liked the fact that it freed them from a lot of things they didn't like, not having to rely on others for a ride, not having to own or pay for a car, not having to walk or bike. And so we took that concept and built that in to the campaign creative. And we said that transit lets you set yourself free from the alternatives. It lets you travel independently and on your own terms. And then we took that basic idea and figured out how do we customize that for each of the many audiences that need to be addressed within these 4 diverse communities. So for high school and junior high students, we talked about set yourself free from asking for rides, something that students usually are always doing. For college students, we talked about set yourself free from the cost of driving. And for both college students and young workers, and really a pretty diverse audience, we talked about set yourself free from worrying about your ride, whether that's worrying about whether the person you ride with will show up today, or will your car start, or will you have the money to pay for insurance. That covers a whole lot of things that people fret about relating to transportation. One of the really, and we used a lot of different media in that campaign, everything from posters and bus wraps to direct mail that targeted very specific areas. But one program that I particularly liked was a partnership marketing program like the ones Elle was just talking about. And it was a partnership between Victor Valley Transit and Victor Valley Community College. And the college had a prepaid program whereby their students could ride free with their ID. So they had a vested interest in encouraging their students to use transit. And because of that, they gave Victor Valley Transit access to a lot of on-campus media to communicate with their students. So Victor Valley Transit had to pay for the posters and implementing this, but they paid nothing for the exposure. They were allowed to put up displays in the student union and other key traffic areas so that students could see how to use the service. They let them put up window clings in major walk routes. So they basically had on-campus billboards. They did posters on bulletin boards. They provided them with social media graphics that they pushed out on all of a dozen social media platforms that reached students. And then finally, they provided them with little pocket-sized cards that went along when somebody got their new student ID that reminded them that they could use that ID as a bus pass and how to get information about transit. I'm going to share one more case study with you, and then we'll turn it over to questions. This is from Central Kentucky. I think Elle mentioned them once, Bluegrass Ride. For many years, transit in the Bluegrass region was operated by Bluegrass Community Action Program, and it was basically a social service transportation. As you can see what the vehicles look like, and they were used mainly by seniors and people with disabilities, maybe the very low income, but not by much of anyone else because they didn't even realize this transit was available to the general public. So BGCAP decided they wanted to convert their transportation program into a true public transit system. And they began with a service plan that looked at how to improve the routes in 3 communities and then provide regularly scheduled intercity service between those communities. And they opted to make it all fare free. Once they had the service plan, before they got around to launching it, they contacted us about marketing because they recognized that marketing was the crowbar that would help this new service actually succeed and reach its potential. So we began with branding, and back to that, how do you create visibility? And we created branding that totally set this service apart from the old social service vehicles. They were getting new vehicles for the services, and so they could get them with this new branding on it. We used the identity of Bluegrass Ride, which is a name that resonates in that region, and used visuals to go with it, and then branded the buses for each community with the name of that community. So Georgetown was the first one to be implemented. We then created user-friendly passenger information that gave people just what they needed to use the service, a good route map, schedules, and if they went online to one single website, bluegrassride.org, they could easily access information about all of the communities. So that might be a solution for Tracy's problem of how do we put contact information on our vehicles about how to get to these various different phone numbers. For the introduction, they used newspaper ads early on to let people know the new service was coming, but also direct mail targeted to the households that were right along the routes and that showed them exactly where the service was going to go. And everything promoted the use of Google Maps to get schedule information. They also used social media ads and cinema advertising as supporting media to get the message out there. And then finally, they did a big launch event, and I'm pretty sure the entire town came out for it, it looks like, with branded cookies and buses that people could get on board and check out. And as a result of all of that, they saw a major increase in ridership. So the service was launched in January 16th of 2024. Before that time, their ridership was averaging somewhere between 400 and 600 per month. After that, ridership rapidly grew to well over 2,000, approaching 2,500 per month. So about a fourfold increase in ridership as a result of the combination of better service and better marketing. So with that, I will turn it back to Travis to lead the questions.
All right, thanks so much, Selena and Elle, for that great presentation. A lot of great information, and I know a lot of our providers are going to be able to dig into that later as well. One question I have, and you kind of touched on it, I think, when you're talking about ridership and that successful campaign, is, what are some metrics, that providers can use? And Tracy and Ginny, jump in as well if there's certain metrics that you've used, but how can you tell if you're having a successful marketing campaign versus not? I'm sure it's hard to tease, ridership and what's, causing that, but what are some things that people can typically look to?
That really is the big question in marketing, is how do you know if it's working or not? And we really have to look at what is it we're trying to get people to do. If we're trying to drive traffic to a website so they learn more about our service, then we need to carefully track our website hits and see if we're seeing an increase as a result of the things we're doing. If we're trying to build ridership, then ultimately ridership is our metric. But sometimes it's hard over the long haul to measure, the effect of all the different things that are going on. But when we do something like a free ride day, or we offer a free ride promotion where people can, refund, get a ticket and get free rides, then it allows us to track the impacts of a specific thing that we're doing. So we sort of have to build the metrics into our campaigns.
Yeah, and in the digital advertising is a little bit helpful in being able to tell you did your ad result in the action that you wanted the online person to take? Did they click through to your website, or did they click through to your free ride offer? And I would say the most effective way to figure ROI for something like that is to include a free ride offer, and then you'll be able to track on your end how many of those offers were used.
Yeah, I'll reiterate what she had just mentioned. I would have said most of our tracking is having to be done analog. We don't have a lot of digital, so it is really hard to determine if things are working and if they're not. I kind of look at, are we getting a lot of comments and feedback on Facebook when we're advertising? Or, do we hear feedback from riders saying, hey, I heard about you from so-and-so? But there is a lot of word of mouth. We work with a lot of agencies, living facilities, hospitals, like things like that. And you get that feedback from them, but it's not easily trackable. So I agree. It's difficult to determine for us.
Sure. All right. Additionally, I'm wondering, and I'll throw this to Selena and Elle first, are there some common pitfalls that you've seen that agencies kind of fall into, whether it's, something that everyone does or they've commonly done that maybe you just see as not being effective when you come in to help somebody maybe craft a strategy? And then, Tracy and Ginny, if you want to jump in with, are there some things that maybe you used to do that you don't do anymore because it's just, not effective anymore?
Elle, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is TV advertising that builds awareness. So TV advertising is pretty expensive, and it can certainly help build more awareness in your community. And we have a client who had a really catchy jingle, and they ran TV advertising for years because their marketing manager was a former TV ad sales guy. And everybody in the community knew that jingle. And so they would be at the transit agency would be like at the county fair with their table set up, and people would come up and they would sing the jingle to them, but then they would learn that those people never rode. So it had great awareness building, but it hadn't resulted in any ridership. So finding ways that that are really focused on getting people to ride, and that includes all the ways that you could potentially slip in a free ride offer to get people to start using the system, and with the hope that they'll continue to use, with the hope and likelihood that they'll continue to use the system.
TV is actually where we made the biggest change recently. We cut out about 30,000 in TV advertising last year, and it was mostly because, you know, that target demographic is the seniors and the disabled individuals who are home and likely watching TV all day, and those are where the people we're hitting, yet we lost a whole lot of funding last year for that demographic. And so, you know, when you're trying to look at the return on investment, we would be better off moving some of that marketing money to a different, you know, method and reaching somebody where we know that the funding would help pay for them, because we can't transport, you know, those individuals or the maximum number without the maximum funding. So it really is a weighing scale of where do you think that you'll get the most return.
Sure.
You know, the pitfall I've seen people fall into is, and this probably isn't in such rural systems, but more in small urban systems, is marketing to audiences that they don't serve very well. And I remember once going into a kickoff meeting for a system and saying, okay, let's talk about who you consider to be your target markets. And they were all about commuters. They wanted to get commuters on their vehicles. And I picked up their schedule and looked at it, and I said, your buses don't go out on the street till 8 a.m. and they come back in at 5:30. I think there's a disconnect here. You know, so we have to be realistic. We've got to look at what it is we offer, how frequently our buses run, where they go, and then pick target audiences that we really have a benefit to offer.
Great. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we've crossed the 1 o'clock hour, and I want to thank everybody for participating in today's webinar. And again, we'll be sharing a recording of today's webinar. A lot of great information. If anyone has any questions, please reach out, and we will definitely follow up and share some resources. I did want to make you aware of several webinars that we have coming up, including next week on federal funding. Obviously, funding is a big piece of the marketing discussion as well, and using our resources wisely. So a lot of great information coming up. And as always, if you have any ideas for future webinars, definitely reach out in the coming year so that we can get those planned. Thanks again to our panelists today and everyone joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.